Get going. Is that recording? It seems to be recording. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead actually and get the door a little bit more closed. Keep in. Doors unlocked. But you know, since it's so cold outside,
yes, it is.
we need to make sure that we stay warm. And I'm saying that for the benefit of all the people who are watching from other parts of the country. Okay, so we are now going to launch ourselves into a wonderful section of Torah that many people love to simply turn pages on, because we are in Parashat Tazria, which has two main themes. It has the starting theme, which has to do with the birth of children and the sacrifices that go along with it. And then it has the major theme of Sara'at, of what generally gets called leprosy. We've talked about that for off and on for the last couple of years. We're going to talk today more about the first half, about the issue of childbirth. So if you're thinking, oh good, this is a relief, something nice and wonderful, guess what? It's a section that has caused a great deal of consternation among people that would like to see equality between the different genders in Judaism, and also in some of the particulars of how it's been understood by our sages, can call into question certain scientific principles. And as we'll see, it can still be a very controversial and deep topic, but we'll hopefully be able to find a great deal of spiritual understanding as well, and also realize that our less kind readings are our own choice. That if we choose to read this section of Torah in a very negative light, or as in a light that is very negative towards women, or because we think it's negative towards women, we therefore think very negatively of our sages, that is our choice, not something that we have to do. That there are ways to read this much more pleasantly than our first instinct might lead us to do. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get down to some actual text. Volunteer? Harriet, thank you.
This is our last week you were going to be leaving.
Oh, you're heading back up north?
Yes. Please order some good weather for up there.
Well, we gave you one last cold week here.
Yeah, to prepare me, yes.
Exactly. Toughen you up.
Okay.
So we're on chapter 12, book of Leviticus. It's page 649.
Parshat Tzuris. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. When a woman at childbirth bears a male, she shall be impure 7 days. She shall be impure as at the time of her menstrual infirmity. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 33 days. She shall not touch any consecrated thing, nor enter the sanctuary until her period of purification is completed."
Okay, we're going to pause there. I want to make sure, first of all, we got the timeline clear, and then we're going to talk about what's actually happening here. So we've got a start event to our cycle, which is, of course, birth. And then we're going to have 2 periods of time, not drawn to scale, by the way. We've got 7 days, and we got 33 days. What's happening in terms of the ritual law here, what's being called purity and impurity, what's happening for these 7 and 33 days? What was just described?
Circumcision.
Well, circumcision is
First
happening right here,
right
right? We're having a Brit Milah, and that's Brit, not Brit. So that happens after our 7 days. And before that 7 days, what is her status vis-a-vis ritual purity?
She's impure for that entire time.
She's impure as? What kind of impurity?
Well, it's the same as if she were menstruating.
Okay, exactly. So it's the same kind of impurity that she would have if she was Nida. Nida is the monthly menstruation impurity. And again, I hate the English word impurity, but it's the only one we got. Ritual impurity is better, but it gets long to say. During Nida, there is no hanky-panky, so to speak.
I've always thought that was very kind and generous of our forefathers to say, stay away from her for 40 days.
40 days? Oh, you mean this whole period?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you were talking about the Nida period, which I was like,
what?
was going to say, I think if you stayed away 40 days every month,
No,
that-
not every month.
the math doesn't work out.
No, but when you have a child.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to the stay away for 40 days
Okay.
part because that's actually not true.
Oh, darn.
So hold on a second. So
Yeah.
we have Nita, right? And during Nita, we have no sex, and we have no, for example, sacrifices. We have no, if her family is Kohanim, she has no truma. That's the extra food that was consecrated that the priests and their family could eat while they were in a state of ritual purity, which is impossible for her during the 7 days. So this is a period of separation in terms of her and other people and ritual activities. Both categories are there. It doesn't mean separation in terms of go off and live in the red tent, but it does mean separation for many forms of contact.
But no different from any other.
And no different from any other month. Exactly. No different from any other month. And then, assuming it's a boy, 7 days later you have the Brit Milah, you have the circumcision, and then we have these 33 days. Now, the term that's used here is the state of blood purification, which just sounds so nice. But let's ignore the terminology that's being used, especially the English, and say, well, what is it like? What's happening? What is the functional distinction during these 33 days? What does it say she can't do?
Enter the site, she can't touch.
All right, so no sacrifices, that stays the same.
Right.
What's the other
She
thing?
may not enter the sanctuary.
And which, right, no sacrifices, no sanctuary,
She
no-
can't touch any
Can't touch
consecrated thing.
and no holy things, which Truma is a part of. So this stays the same. This does not go over.
Doesn't say.
Sex, okay.
Oh,
Oh, no. All right, sorry to burst your bubble. But during this period of blood purification, hate that term, any signs of bleeding are considered to be a leftover from the birth and do not render her as a nida, do not render her as a menstruant. So even though it's 33 days, where you would presume that at some point during this time, she would probably menstruate, if it was a normal time, not postpartum, but just a normal period, because most women's cycles are less than 33 days. Despite that fact, if you see any signs of blood that would normally trigger a reaction of, this must be nida, you ignore it during these 33 days.
Do they visit the mikveh?
What's that?
Do they visit the mikveh?
So at the end, as preparation for going to the sanctuary and for offering the sacrifice and all of that, then yes, that would happen. That she
But
would
it's at the end of the 30.
absolutely, absolutely. So if she sees, a little bleeding here and a little spot there and a little more there, nothing happens, and her husband's relations continue as they mutually agree upon. All right, so again, throughout all of Judaism, he's never allowed to force himself on her. Not
That's true.
just in this postpartum situation, but there is no prohibition on intimacy if they both would like to be intimate.
and, oh,
Sex would be okay without visiting the mikveh?
that's what I was gonna say.
During this period, yes.
At
Yes.
the end of 7 days.
It's a rather unique situation. It doesn't come up often.
You probably wouldn't have it, but.
But
Well, we're going to talk about intimacy a little bit later on. But yes, but that's the rule that is derived from the passage we just had. All right, so we got the game plan, we got the timeline, we understand the distinctions being made here, and then at the end we have, I should have left more room,
yes.
an offering. At the end is when she goes to. Did we already say that or not? We haven't read that section. We haven't read that section. That's going to be verse 6. Sorry, forget I said anything until we get to verse 6. Harriet?
Okay, if she bears a female, she shall be impure 2 weeks, as during her menstruation, and she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 66 days.
Okay. Boy, girl.
Ooh, the girls are one
Girls get a distinction of double.
word. Why?
Why? wait till the commentaries.
Right.
But I'm glad you got the right question, okay? So the question obviously is going to be, why would you make a distinction between whether you've had a boy or whether you've had a girl? What in the world could generate that kind of distinction? And then, of course, why might it be double will be a secondary question. But hold on to that, because you're not the first person in Jewish history to ask that question. Okay, now we've reached verse 6, which is the same regardless of whether it's happening on the 40th day or the 80th day.
On the completion of her period of purification for either son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a purification offering. He shall offer it before the Lord and make expiation on her behalf. She shall then be pure from her flow of blood. Such are the rituals concerning her who bears a child, male or female. If, however, her means do not suffice for a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a purification offering. The priest shall make expiation on her behalf, and she shall be pure.
All right. So once again, we get into the wonderful issues of English translation. If you go back into to our good verse 6 where we started there, and you look down in our third line in the Hebrew, third word in, it's saying that what she is bringing is lechatat. And if you remember from our discussion of sacrifices a little while ago, we talked about a chatat as being a sin offering. Remember, al-chet, the same word that we use on Yom Kippur for the word sin, chatat, you could translate it as a sin offering. Now, obviously, the translator here wanted to focus on the functional purpose of this offering more than on the linguistic name of the offering, and so used the term purification. But of course, purification is a bit of a slippery term as well, and it's going to, if we kept only that term, we would obscure some of the commentary that we are about to see. So I want to make sure that we understand that the word itself is chatat, that she is bringing this as a chatat offering, in addition to bringing the olah offering, which is the lamb. And so we've got 2 offerings, one as a burnt offering, which is usually as a celebratory type thing, and one as a chatat offering, which is usually for a sin or transgression. Got that? Confusing? Yes? Perplexing as to why she would be bringing anything like a chatat offering at the birth of a child? Yes? Maybe? Hello?
Yes.
Everybody's stunned. Okay. Okay, no problem. We're gonna take this apart. Do notice at least the small glimmer of liberal hope that there is at least some poverty remission here, because at the very end it points out that if she can't afford the lamb, don't worry, you can bring birds instead, which were considerably cheaper than a lamb. I should point out, although we're not going to go into it today, but Rabban Gamliel, or Shimon ben Gamliel, excuse me, when the pigeon sellers in Jerusalem were extorting women for the prices of these birds to be brought for this offerings, he threatened to overrule what Torah had written and said instead of having to bring a set of doves for every birth, you'd only have to bring 1 set no matter how many kids you were going to have. And that threat, he never had to act on it, but that threat made the price fall by like 10-fold overnight. So the Torah means it, and the rabbis backed it up, that this should be something, a ceremony that every woman can participate in, and should not be something that would then be, the price gouging would take place because they knew that the women had to come. So hey, we can charge a fortune for pigeons. They're just pigeons.
Did it become obvious to everyone else whether the person could not afford the sheep?
Well, from the sound of the text describing this price gouging incident, it seemed like most women were in a position where they were bringing the birds.
Yeah.
And since there might be other reasons that she'd be showing up with other animals or not with animals, just as we discussed before, it may not have highlighted one way or the other the financial situation. But poverty was no stranger, and it was not considered a great shame in ancient Israel either. Unlike our discussion of showing up with a sin offering, where you were publicly showing that you had done something wrong.
Right.
Although we'll come back to the sin offering here as well. Okay, good? Ready for commentary? Up.
If you had multiple twins,
Mhm.
does that affect the length of time? It's not addressed.
Just boys and girls. So if you had a boy and a girl, then you would end up with double duty. And it would presumably also affect the number of sacrifices brought on behalf of the births, since it was multiple births. But as far as the time goes, you wouldn't stack them. They would be the time to be served concurrently rather than consecutively. So it's not like if you had two boys, you would end up at 80 days, or if you had two girls, that you would end up at 160 days. I mean,
If you had one of each,
if you had one of each, you would end up at 80 days total. The 66 plus 14 for the girl. You wouldn't go further. But of course, you would still have the Brit Milah on the 7th or on the 8th day for the boy.
but you would add them there if you had one of each.
No.
You would.
Just choose the longer time
Ex-
period.
Thank you.
There you go.
Much better way of explaining it. you would serve the longer period.
Thank
Yes.
you for asking that question.
Yeah.
I was thinking it. Didn't ask.
Well, that is the general rule, that if you are thinking of a question, chances are at least two other people in the room are also thinking of it, and only one of you is going to have the guts to ask. And why shouldn't it be you? So, good way of asking. All right. So, why? Let's look at some of the answers that have been advanced. I will warn you in advance, some of the answers that have been advanced for these questions may not be to your liking. But the good thing is, we've got multiple answers.
Okay.
All right.
His disciples asked Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, on what account has the Torah said that a woman after childbirth must bring an offering?
All right, remember that was our question. Right? The olah we can sort of understand. It's a celebratory, it's more likely to be a celebratory offering or a Thanksgiving offering. So sure, you've had a baby, why not? But the chatat, the sin offering?
When she kneels down to give birth, she leaps to swear that she will not have sexual relations with her husband again. Therefore, the Torah has said she should bring an offering.
I'm not going through this again, ever.
I don't want to see him.
Remember, no epidurals. And
That's right, not even that.
yeah, not even that, not even that. You're doing it just, on your own, with the help of the community of ladies and such, but it's no medicine that's really helping you. Just good technique, which is why she's kneeling on the birthing stool rather than laying on a bed, just because some French guy wants to watch. That is, by the way, why women now in the West are giving birth on beds rather than giving birth while squatting, where gravity helps you. Because a Frenchman, I can't remember, it was a French aristocrat who really liked watching the birth process, and he got a much better view if the woman was laying down. And so that became the fashion. Yeah, okay. You got to blame the French for lots of things. What's that?
Teacher said
That doesn't sound very logical.
Doesn't sound very logical to want to watch or to...
No, to make that the reason that why women have
Well,
their babies.
and if you go to most pre-industrial societies, most women use chairs and stools and other means of giving birth because it is a much more effective means of helping something move from your body.
So long as the child is being delivered normally.
Provided
Otherwise-
there isn't a problem, of course. And unfortunately, when there's a problem, then you get the person onto a bed. Absolutely. In any event, that aside, what do we think about his answer? The reason why she had to bring a sin offering is because she is taking care of the vow that she made under duress that she needs to apologize for. Plausible? We can at least imagine, you don't have to be a woman, but you can imagine perhaps going through such a painful situation and saying, you know what, I never want to do this again in my life because this hurts, and therefore I'm not going to do the things that lead to this ever again. You can imagine someone making that kind of rash declaration in the throes of labor.
Or the use of some colorful
Or the use of some colorful language. Diplomatically put. Very good, very good. But there's a response to this within our own tradition, because that's not the normal way we handle such situations.
Rabbi Joseph objected, but does she not do it on purpose? So releasing the oath requires her regretting having taken the oath. Furthermore, what she should bring is the offering that is required on account of an oath, which is a lamb or a goat, and not the bird that she's required to present.
Right. So he's saying, wait a minute. If the issue is that she took did an oath rashly, then what is necessary is that she actually regrets having taken the oath, which there's no indication here, and it seems to be a pro forma that she has to do it, and maybe she still feels that oath was a really good oath, and that may be another problem, in which case she'd have to get divorced, but she wouldn't have to bring an offering. It's only considered a rash oath if you regret it later. Otherwise, it was just good timing. And secondly, if it really was an issue of breaking an oath, of breaking a vow, or trying to regret a vow inopportunely spoken, then we have a different offering that is set for that by the Torah, rather than the birds. So there's some pushback on this, that maybe Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai doesn't quite have a perfect handle of why the chatat offering would be brought. But it is I think, meant to be less a precise description of what is actually happening in terms of the Torah law, and more a recommendation to husbands to be sympathetic to their wives. As Sarah pointed out, perhaps the woman wants a break after having just given birth and maybe having a buffer zone, what you thought was 40 days, but it's not quite. But if she wanted 40 days, maybe the husband should understand that she, having gone through this ordeal, which was really life and death, quite literally, she might still be ambivalent in her feelings towards renewing intimacy, not because she doesn't love him, but simply because she's recovering psychologically and physically. So there may be less of an attempt here to truly uncover why the Torah sets the time that it does and sets the sacrifice that it does, and more of a raising of awareness among husbands of give the woman a break, because chances are she might have even said things during that labor that she regrets, and if you heard them, you'll probably regret that she said them too. So have a little more sympathy. Plausible? Maybe? Maybe. Onward.
His disciples asked Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, on what account has the Torah said that a male involves 7 unclean days and a female 14?
Right, that's our time period here, the first block.
In the case of the birth of a male, on account of which everyone is so happy, she will regret her oath after only 7 days. But on the occasion of the birth of a female, on account of which everybody is distressed, she will regret her oath only after 14 days.
Okay, I'm glad you're laughing rather than storming out of the room. Okay, remember, this is an opinion. All right, so why would there be a difference in joy between the birth of a boy and the birth of a girl? All right, so carrying on the family legacy, the family inheritance, absolutely was pegged to the male line at the time. Very important.
I have a husband who said that.
What's that?
I have a husband who said
And you had a husband that said that.
that.
Any other reasons why?
We have to marry off the daughter of the parents.
All right, so chances were historically that your sons would stay with you. They would help you in your business or your farm. They would be part of your economic livelihood. They would be net contributors in the course of their lifetime to you. And they would also be your security in old age. Boys were your social security card. They were the ones who would be there to provide for you, because your daughter, again, by the social norms of the day, were more likely to be married off and to go live with her new husband in his family's home, or estate, or city, or wherever it might be. And so therefore your daughter was likely to be a net loss to the family fortune, because you would A, have to pay just to keep her alive, raise her, clothe her, and all of those sorts of things. And B, there would usually be some form of gift that would go along with her marriage that would be leaving to go to someone else's household. And in times of scarcity, which has been most of the last, 15 million years, a net loss was a net loss. And so the birth of a girl, as happy as you may be that she and the mother were alive and healthy and the joy you could look forward to together, also came with some mixed emotions of, okay, now we got to start planning for this and see if we can fit this into our whole family system without all starving to death.
And even today, in countries such as China and India, they're not pleased at the birth of a child. I read the statistics.
A girl, you mean?
Right, a girl, I'm sorry, a girl. Because statistically, women in India can have themselves checked as to which they're carrying, and girls are aborted like crazy, and not boys. And China as well, they're much happier about boy for exactly what you say, they have the support. So aren't you guys glad that you made us equal in business and we can rise to the same level?
Well, I should certainly think so.
Maybe not.
Well,
Can't beat the competition.
And again, you can see that specifically in cases like in China or India, which are a much more scarce society, where the pressures of population is much more keenly felt than felt here on average. You can see that even to this day, boys as a net benefit to the family are preferred as opposed to girls, which financially are a net loss. And it may seem callous or cruel to think of it that way, but when you're talking about the total amount of food that's going to go on the family table, and really you're fighting off disease and starvation based upon the number of mouths to feed and the number of hands that can work, a girl was going to be burdensome to many, many families. And so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, again, is not necessarily saying that girls are bad, but he is reflecting on the emotional reality of his society, which is that when a girl is born, the family is going to feel slightly less joyful because they know what the financial reality will be for them. I mean, we can see, in our own day and age, that parents that have children born to them that are going to need special medical attention or needs will love their children no less than they would love other children that didn't have the additional medical expenses and difficulties associated with it. But they will have a mixture of emotional turmoil when foreseeing the future that this child will have. And that's simply a natural response. Doesn't mean that you abort girls just because they're going to be girls. Judaism does not advocate that. It doesn't mean that you would leave the girl out to die, a la Sparta. But it does mean that there would be some emotional turmoil. And that's something that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is trying to draw to the attention of the people in their community. Not to be surprised that people are complicated. Make sense? Maybe? Okay. Onward.
Rabbi Ishmael says, the Torah has declared a period of uncleanness.
That means ritual impurity, right?
Right. And then cleanness.
Ritual purity.
With reference to a male. And it has also declared a period of uncleanness and cleanness with reference to a female. Just as in the case of the male, when the Torah has declared a period of uncleanness and cleanness, the periods correspond to the time in which he is fashioned. So when the Torah has declared a period of uncleanness and cleanness, the periods correspond to the time in which she is fashioned.
Got it?
No.
No. Okay, that's why I'm drawing a timeline. All right. Conception.
A little more complicated
Birth.
to make.
What does fashioned mean? What does fashion means? It means fetus is formed. So there's an issue in Judaism, in every society, but in Judaism it has ritual implications as well, which is if there is a miscarriage, does it count as a birth or not? And where along that process does the fetus become fetus enough to count as more than simply a bodily discharge and actually count as a full miscarriage of a fetus? And Rabbi Ishmael, and we're going to see he's not agreed with, but Rabbi Ishmael is arguing that this timeline, the 733 and the 1466, is not merely about whether you are ritually impure or ritually pure. It's actually a gestational timeline. And that boys are formed, boys are, that's right, like that. Boys are formed at the 40-day mark. And girls are at the 80-day mark. That a boy fetus turns into a boy fetus at 40 days. And a girl fetus only becomes a fetus at 80 days.
What about the beating heart at 18 days?
What about the beating heart at 18 days? Not an issue, because what we're talking about here is whether or not there is the form of a person that is visible to the naked eye. Not about whether there is a microscopic cluster of cells that's moving other cells around in microscopic tubing. It's whether or not there is something that could be seen or felt with the naked eye or with the hands. Indeed, this was one of the more grisly tasks of sages in the past, which was to feel through the abortive miscarriage matter to tell whether or not there was a shaped fetus within. Not a pleasant job. But that's your objection? No one here has ever...
Possibly be different.
How could it possibly be different?
Well, we're much more complicated. All those organs and stuff have to produce babies, whereas guys are so simple.
Okay, so we're going to see that that's not the solution taken by Rabbi Ishmael. However, no. I should point out that there was during the Middle Ages. I didn't bring the commentary because we had limited time, but there were opinions that advanced actually opposite of what we now know from modern biology, but they did the best they could with their hypotheses. Was that, well, maybe all fetuses are boys at 40 days, and you don't become a girl until 80 days. We now know from at least what I was taught in biology class that it's actually worked the opposite, that all fetuses are essentially more female in structure earlier on, and then as different hormones and chemicals are released during the gestation, boy characteristics become manifest later in the cycle. Is that what everyone else remembers from biology class too?
Yes, right.
Okay, good. I'm not a biologist and I don't play one on TV. Okay. But they didn't know that then, but it was a good guess, even if it was backwards, and it was a good way to try and save Rabbi Ishmael's hypothesis, because it would seem from our observations that this ain't true. And it would also seem from their observations.
Oh, they said to him,
The they meaning the other sages.
the period in which a fetus is fashioned is not to be derived from the period of uncleanness.
Yeah, but just because God said that there was 40 days for a boy and 80 days for a girl, doesn't mean God was trying to tell us anything about science and about biology. That's just the days of ritual uncleanliness. Why are you reading this backwards into the womb?
So they said, there was the case of Cleopatra, Queen of Alexandria,
And in case you ever thought that she was a hero, here's a great story about her.
whose slave girl was condemned by the state to death. They examined her and found that both the male and the female were formed by the 41st day.
So what'd they do? She was sentenced to death. So as long as they're killing her anyway, they cut her open and saw what the baby looked like inside.
He said,
And they did this a number of times with different gendered infants so they could see. It's, hey, you've already got a person ready-made dying, so you might as well examine them, right?
Right, you didn't have to wait for the 80th day or 41st day. We could
Or
see.
God forbid, you should just bury them. But what they found upon slitting open the bellies of these slave girls was that actually boys and girls gestate at more or less the same rate. And that's kind of incontrovertible empirical evidence, isn't it? Right? And we're talking 2,000 years ago. They did the science, grotesquely and meanly, but they did the science. And their science, based upon our understanding, is correct as well. And yet Rabbi Ishmael doesn't buy it.
I present proof to you from the Torah, and you present proof to me from idiots?
So what? Wait. You're going to believe what some Egyptian queen who doesn't mind cutting up on her own slave girls tells you over my proof from Torah? I mean, why would I need to go and actually do science? The Torah tells me what I need to know, was Rabbi Ishmael's position. And the sages don't argue that the Torah tells us what we need to know. They're just arguing that the Torah didn't tell us this. That just because you're claiming that your deduction, Rabbi Ishmael, comes from the Torah, And just because you claim that that's a better source of information than the empirical observations of Cleopatra's entourage, doesn't mean your deduction from the Torah is in itself accurate. Right? I can agree with you in principle that the Torah is always true without believing your analysis of the Torah is true. Which is why we come to our final conclusion.
And the sages say, all the same is the process of the formation of the male and female. Both are completed on the 41st day.
Don't turn the page over.
No, so we're still stuck with saying, why is the period longer for a boy? We have no explanation.
Exactly.
Right?
At the end of it, according to the sages, they say, look, this and this,
Nothing to do with each other.
Nothing-
two different timelines. And the girl or the boy, 41 days, they are considered to be formed, and therefore, if there is a miscarriage after that point, it's considered to be the miscarriage of a formed fetus, and then certain halakha trips into effect. But we're not making a distinguishing feature about the gender of the fetus. So if a fetus is miscarried at 75 days, and it's a girl, we still say it's formed and everything happens as though it was a boy. They're not going to make a distinction between the practical halakha. But that does mean we're left with still not knowing why there's a distinction between the two.
At 41st day, is that not the basis for determining about abortion also?
No, actually, and this is something that I considered putting in more detail, but then I didn't. But I can give you the short version because I think it's important that the question came up to be answered. So, according to Jewish law, during what part of gestation can an abortion take place?
First 40 days.
There. Okay? If on the birthing stool there is a problem with the birth and the baby has not yet been birthed, the baby can be aborted on the stool. Okay? This is not something that you do just because you suddenly think, you know what, I'd like to go to Spain next week, and if I have a baby, it's not going to be convenient. No. We're not talking about that kind of decision-making process. But if it's a choice between, do we let the mother and baby fight it out, and one of them is going to survive, or maybe both, but maybe both will die, or do we abort the child while it's still in the womb, even though labor has begun, and allow the mother to survive, and we remove the fetus, which we agree is fully formed, then you abort the fetus up to that very last moment and save the life of the mother. And in fact, that's not even a choice. That is what you do. Once the fetus has begun to emerge, once the fetus has, the head is out, and even if it gets stuck at that point, you can't kill the baby that has now emerged. And then you do have to let whatever happens. You can do everything you possibly can to save both, obviously, but you can't deliberately kill either the mother or the baby in order to save the other one. And you're left with two lives that are locked in struggle. And you simply have to let it work itself out, so to speak, and often tragically, if history is any guide. But as far as abortion is concerned in Judaism, the termination of a pregnancy can happen up to the last moment before the baby is born. But it is not done casually, and it's not done based upon any considerations other than the most serious of
But
ones.
the laws are different after 40 days.
To save the life of the mother.
Not so much. The laws are different of the consequences once the abortion has happened, of whether it's counted then as a miscarriage or whether it's counted as just a failed period. But the truth is that much of the conversation around abortion within the Jewish world has become colored in recent years because of the conversation in the non-Jewish world. And there have been many in the Jewish world that have tried to recast traditional Jewish understandings of abortion and when abortion can or can't happen to either match the most extreme of the pro-life group or the most extreme of the pro-choice group. And so you'll have people in Judaism say, well, see, Judaism says that it's not a baby until it comes out, so therefore you can have an abortion, the partial birth abortions, et cetera, et cetera. And no, Judaism says, no, you can't do a partial birth abortion, because once the baby comes out, it's out and you're not allowed to do that, and you shouldn't be having abortions for a trivial reason at any point during this time, and all of that, which makes the pro-choice group very unhappy. But then we turn to the pro-life group and we say, no, just because it is a perfectly viable child, even though you're at this last threshold, if necessary, the child can be terminated to save the mother. And we're sorry about that, but that's what Jewish law says. One of the upshots of this, by the way, is that most Jewish authorities, although we are not pro-choice in the classical definition that you'll see in many of the most extreme pro-choice groups, we still tend to vote pro-choice because we believe that we should have the right to decide according to our law, and that this law should not be made for us by the government. That the government should say that this is permissible, and then you, and in consultation with your rabbi, should decide not to do it, or, God forbid, in extreme circumstances, to do it.
I do remember years ago, David and I were brought up in Brooklyn and got married there, but then shortly after we got married, moved to Massachusetts,
Mhm.
Canby country. And I do remember when I got pregnant, people said to me, be careful, do not go to one of those Catholic hospitals. You go to a Jewish hospital for the birth of the baby and affiliate with a doctor who will do that, because the Catholic hospitals will choose the life of the child over the mother.
Interesting.
Yes, because they need to have the baptism happen. The mother's been baptized, they need to have the baptism. Whereas
She's already saved, but the
she's
baby
already
hasn't
saved, but
been.
it's not. But in the Jewish hospitals, I remember that's what I was told. And
Wow.
I was very careful to do that. Whereas in the Jewish world, we who are already born, the life of the mother is first,
Right.
and whatever they have to do, if it's threatening the life of the mother, they will do.
Correct.
And I
Fair.
think that was fine.
But it's an interesting practical distinction that I wasn't aware of between the different hospital systems. Okay, now you can see why I didn't want to make it a complete tangent, but I'm glad the topic came up for a little more clarification. All right, back to sexual relations. Harriet.
Okay. Our rabbis have taught in the first 3 months
That is the first 3 months of gestation.
of gestation, sexual relations are hard for the woman and also for the fetus.
So not recommended during the beginning of gestation.
In the middle 3 months, they are hard for the woman, but good for the fetus.
So she may not like it, but it's considered to be a benefit to the fetus.
In the
By the way, these are recommendations. This is not law.
Right. In the final 3 months, they are good for the woman and good for the fetus. For on account of sexual relations, the offspring will be well formed and of strong vitality.
All right, now scientifically we know that you're not actually going to be changing the genetic structure of the child after conception has taken place. But whether or not you'll be changing the relationship between husband and wife by having a proper relationship of intimacy during gestation, that is still up in the air. And so making sure that there is a good relationship between husband and wife and that they are still loving each other at the same time that pregnancy is taking place is a very important principle. However, we have a very interesting problem.
A Tanat authority stated, he who has sexual relations on the 90th day is as though he had shed blood.
All right, so whatever you do,
Not on
don't
the
have sex on the 90th day.
How does anyone know this?
Well,
Said
who knows when the 90th day is? I mean, you go to the doctor and you say you're pregnant, they can give you that little dial thing when they, try to estimate of when they, from when your last period was to when you first, tested and where the baby seems to be in the development cycle. We're guessing that your conception date was, but it's a guess. And then you got like a 2, 3, 4 day window sometimes even more than that. So how do you know when the 90th day is? And that's what we can do with ultrasounds. What did they do 2,000 years ago? Who knew when their 90th day after conception was? And if 90th day after conception is like the kin to murder, then what are you supposed to do?
Stay away altogether.
No.
No? Oh, said Abaya, one goes along having sexual relations and the Lord preserve the simple.
God saves fools. So you know what? You're right. You shouldn't have it on the 90th day. We don't know what the 90th day is. One solution would be, therefore, don't do it at all. The other solution is, keep going. And you know what? God will got you covered.
What you don't know won't hurt.
Exactly. God takes care of idiots, and we're all idiots when it comes to finding out the 90th day.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's okay. But apparently, intimacy was more important than being excessively careful on this principle. Okay, maybe, yes? We're all blushing, move on? Okay. Keep going.
Our rabbis have taught 3 form a partnership in the creation of a human being. The Holy One, blessed be He, one's father and one's mother.
It takes 3 to make a baby.
The father contributes the semen, from which the bones and sinews and nails and brain and white of the eyes come.
I think we can all put together how they're choosing these different pieces. You have to visualize color coding, right? I'm not going to draw a picture of this one.
No,
So if the father contributes the semen and the things that come from the semen happen to be white, put 2 and 2 together.
the mother provides the red, that is the blood, from which the skin, flesh, hair, blood, and the dark part of the eye come.
And again, most of the people in our ancestries have been dark-haired, so you would put together the redness from the mother as being that contributing factor.
And the Holy One, blessed be He, supplies the breath of life and the soul, the identifying features, eyesight, the power to hear, ability to speak and walk, understand and discern.
But pause there.
Yeah.
Just appreciate that for a minute, what was just said.
Yeah.
Right? If it was just father and mother, what do you end up with?
A doll.
A doll.
A doll.
And basically inanimate thing, a creature without reason, without discernment, without the ability to be what we call human. Essentially, a primate. It would be a Homo sapiens primate, just without the sapiens part. It would just be an animal. What is it that takes that and makes it a human? It's the contribution of God, the part that is given from God. And even though we would have had a brain, even though we would have had an eye, we would not have had eyesight. We would not have had discernment and understanding. Even though we would have had legs, we wouldn't have known how to really walk, specifically how to walk in the world. This notion that there's more to being a human and there's more to raising a child and making a child than just providing genetic material and allowing that process to self-replicate is extremely important for us to internalize. That this is saying that there is a partner that goes along with birth that is more than just biology. And that's the spirit that is put into a child. And you can take that literally if you'd like, and if you're reluctant to take that literally, at least please take it figuratively. That there needs to be more to life than mere genetic calculations and propagation. And that we need to find that spiritual side to life, or else we are more or less an animate thing, and that's not so impressive. Okay, and that then leads us with the conclusion.
And when one's time comes along to take leave of the world, the Holy One, blessed be He, takes back his share, and the share of the father and mother he leaves with them.
All right, so since God contributed the soul and the other things that made us human, when death comes, God takes that back. He takes back his part, and he leaves the part that was contributed by the people, meaning the flesh and blood, which is then returned to the earth. So the spiritual side of us is essentially on loan. And that's a good thing, because we know that it will be collected when the time comes, and that it does not die when the body dies, as it pre-existed the body, and because of the origin. Does that make sense? Maybe? Yes? Okay. Which leads us to our final point.
This is along the lines of what Rabbi Eliezer said. What is the meaning of this verse? Who does wondrous things alone, and blessed be his glorious name forever? Even the one for whom a miracle is done does not discern the miracle that has been done for him.
When it comes to childbirth, and when it comes to pregnancy, when it comes to these issues of purity and of ritual impurity and the sacrifices, the distinction between boys and girls in different aspects of our literature, it's really really tempting and really easy to get caught up in all of these details. And it's very easy in that process to never come back to the miracle that's being described here. I mean, if you go back to our very first line of Tazria here, the first line of content in verse 2, when it says, when a woman at childbirth bears a male, that very sentence is where we should be saying, wow, we have the capacity to have children. We have the capacity to create life by the union of two bodies. We have the capacity to raise that to be a beautiful moral and spiritual being. We have the capacity to create a society of these creatures. That's amazing. We get bogged down in the details immediately. And we forget to simply sit back and say, what a miracle this is. And what a miracle it is that it happens so regularly. And what a miracle it is when it happens correctly, because we know that so many things can go wrong. And that should be our primary reflection. And it's good to trot out, as Rabbi Yishmael does and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai does, different explanations for why the different times or different distinctions are given in Torah. Not of practical concern at the moment because we don't have a sacrifice to take it to, and the distinction between boys and girls as far as husband and wife intimacy is only the difference of a week, which is not substantial for most households. But instead to focus on this joyous miracle that has taken place, and that takes place with most of us almost completely forgetting about it the day after the child has been born, because we are quickly up to our neck in diapers and baby food and all the other things that happen. But appreciate the miracle that's happened, even for those of us that are too stupid to notice that the miracle just happened. And with that, thank you very much. And we get to talk more about squishy issues next week.